This cold morning. There's a lot of different ways of describing the cold this morning. I heard a number of them this morning from our speaker. But appreciate you all being out here this morning to participate in what we're doing here. And appreciate our committee members. We have some that'll be missing today. This is a big day for our national news, and there'll be one. Representative Weber is actually in Washington, D.C. today. So with that, Mark, would you call the roll, please? Before you call the roll, I want to recognize our secretaries, Tanner and Mark. Behind every good committee, there's some really, really good people doing all the legwork, and these two are really doing it for us. So thank you very much. Mark, would you go ahead and call the roll?
Thank you. Representative Campbell.
Here.
Representative Knapp.
Here.
Representative Larson. Here. Representative Lawley.
Here.
Representative Riggins.
Excused?
Representative Schmidt. Here. Representative Tarver.
Here.
Representative Weber.
Excused?
Chairman Heiner.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to shake up the order a little bit. Representative Clauston has a meeting in his own committee, so we've moved him to the top. And so we'll deal with House Bill HB 75, first thing this morning, coal severance tax rate. Representative Clauston, would you walk us through this bill, please? And introduce or state your name for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. Ken Clauston, House District 32, which is Campbell County. I represent the western half of our city. So I'm here this morning to present to you House Bill 75, which is a reduction in the severance tax on coal. It's a quick one-page bill decreasing the severance tax on coal, which is currently at 6.5%, and we would lower it to 6%. That would make it equal to what oil and gas are paying. So one of the goals of this bill is just to make it fair, to put it on the same level of parity as oil and gas, letting that coal industry pay the same taxes. Coal pays an immense amount of taxes, more than any other industry the way it is. You know, decreasing this tax from 6.5% to 6% shows Wyoming and shows the world that we're still willing to invest in coal and invest in our people here in Wyoming. It's been a great resource for us, and it's something we need to continue with, in my opinion. Last night, we received a letter for the Campbell County Commissioners, because this question came up: how would our county feel about decreased taxes? All the commissioners have given unanimous support to this bill. And if allowed, I'll just read a quick statement from them. It's a one-page letter, but it's really summed up. It says, "We believe that reducing the tax will enhance the coal industry's ability to produce minerals economically, generate revenue for the state, and maintain well-paying employment opportunities." So I've left with you a couple of little handouts there. One are just my personal notes. If you have any questions there, I'd try to walk you through that. And then the other one is I asked Don Richards for a quick flow sheet trying to explain how taxes work in Wyoming. And he sent the flow sheet, which I've given to you, and I trust you minerals people with experience understand that better than I do. But Mr. Chairman, that's my presentation. I'll stand for any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Representative. Any questions from the committee for Representative Clauston? Seeing none, I have one, Representative. It was just, I think it was 2 years ago, House Bill 130, I believe it was, where we lowered it from 7%. This is in House Bill 105. And we lowered it from 7% down to 6.5%. Could you tell us what effect that has had on the coal business, the coal mining business in the past 2 years?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that question. Yeah, so looked into that, talked to some of the coal mines, and they said, you know, what it allowed them to do was they actually brought employees back. You know, we had seen a decrease in our employment in Campbell County, so they brought employees back. They said it helped pay, you know, increase wages, kept the benefits, and then several of the coal companies bought some new equipment with that money that they saved. So it was great to hear that, you know, they reinvested it back into Wyoming and our employees.
Okay, thank you. And as a follow-up to that, it looks like coal production is continuing to decline. Look, we've had a number of meetings here in the last few days about what our fiscal picture is going to be like in 4 years. It looks like we're going to be operating in deficit spending in 4 years in our school foundation fund. So we're dealing with some property tax relief, we're dealing with some sales tax exemptions, and if we lower this, what's your thoughts? How do we deal with deficit spending coming up in 4 years if we continue to lower taxes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The fiscal note on this for next year is 9.7 million, and then you're going to see that going down about $1 million a year as coal production decreases. So, this is really an investment into coal and continuing to have those jobs and those resources and having these companies continue to, invest in Wyoming. If, Wyoming produces 41% of the nation's thermal coal, if we don't support coal here in Wyoming, we're also competing against these other states that do produce coal. So this is a way of, helping their bottom line a little bit to continue to invest in Wyoming. So my fear is if we don't help support these industries in some way, 9.7 million is a large number, but maybe in the scope of things, it's not. But for the state, but I think for those companies, it may add $1 to $3 million per company on their bottom line. Keeping those jobs open keeps that tax base rolling. So I would hate to see us lose any coal mines because that'd be a much bigger hit to our bottom line than the cost of this bill.
Okay. Any other questions? Representative Campbell, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative. I'm looking at this, 2/3 of that severance money goes right into reserves. Is that correct?
Representative Clauston.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Representative Campbell. Again, I found that flow sheet a little confusing. I mean, somebody on this minerals committee, I don't know if Mr. Knapp, if I can throw you a lifeline, you probably understand this better than I do.
Gonna need a chart and a pointy stick.
Mr. Knapp.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Knapp.
So if you follow the flow chart, you'll see that any severance taxes over that 55 million mark, 2/3 goes to the budget reserve account and a third amount goes to the general fund. But yeah, it's a very interesting flow chart to say the least, and takes a little bit while to understand it too. So, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
All right, any other legislators that would care to discuss this bill? Any elected officials? All right, any from the departments of the state? Nobody wants to talk about this. Any citizens that have traveled here to discuss this bill? Seeing none, representatives from organizations. I hope Mr. Detai steps up here now. Mr. Detai, do you want to introduce yourself and your son as well?
I would love to do that, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, Travis Detai with the Wyoming Mining Association. And I'm joined here this morning by my son, John Detai. John is a student over at the University of Wyoming in the College of Business. He starts tomorrow, and rather than have him laying around my house all morning looking at his phone or playing video games, I said, why don't you get up and get to work and see what I do, whatever that is. So he is joining me today to learn about the process, and I hope you would welcome him, Mr. Chairman.
All right, well, thank you for being here, John. Hopefully you can straighten your father out afterwards here. But Mr. Detai, please.
And Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. So this is a very important bill for the Wyoming coal industry. And, I know we've got a couple of new members, and for the next a couple of meetings, they'll have to sit through my spiel. But the coal industry in Wyoming, in addition to being, one of our core industries, we shoulder a heavy portion of the tax burden. In 2023, And I'm still using 2023 numbers because 2024 numbers as far as taxes and employment won't be out probably until February. So we're working on last year, and I'll caveat, on the previous year, and I'll caveat that with, production was down this year. I don't think that's surprising to anybody for a number of factors. Gas prices have remained stubbornly low, which is good for the consumer, not necessarily good for Wyoming or the coal industry. We had a pretty moderate summer, and moderate weather. And the fact of the matter is that a couple of years ago, many of you recall when we had the extraordinary spike in natural gas prices where they went up above $9. Wyoming coal became very, very desirable at that time, and we got ourselves in a situation where our utility stockpiles were very, very low. They were going out buying on the spot market, and then we couldn't get enough trains to get the coal out. So we missed out on roughly 40 million tons of production that year. Subsequently, we've seen those utilities build up their stockpiles. So we really were in a situation this year where our production is down due to low natural gas prices, to increased stockpiles at the utilities, and to moderate weather over the year. So that's kind of where we are. We do expect that to change a little bit coming into the next year. We're already seeing contracts and that sort of thing being filled. In fact, with the change of administration, I am happy to report that a couple of my companies have said to me that they're actually starting to discuss contracts going out into the 2027, 2029 year. And those conversations were not taking place 6 months ago. So that's a good thing. You saw, if you watch some of the appointment hearings in Washington, D.C., Governor Burgum, in his hearing, he specifically cited, we're going to be needing coal. We're going to be using coal if we're going to deal with what's coming online with artificial intelligence. If we're still going to pursue this whole idea of electric vehicles, we're going to need the power to power that stuff up and data centers. And we're just not going to do it with wind and solar. We need our fossil fuels. We need our coal. We need our oil and gas, and we need our nuclear. So coal is going to play a role. It's not going away. And so that's kind of the purpose of that bill we're not operating in the same environment that we were a decade ago. Our production is less than half it was back in the mid 2000s. The most we produced in this state was 460 million tons. Those days are not here anymore. And I think when you look at where we were back then with a severance tax rate of about 7%, 7% back then, the industry was stronger back then. The demand was where it was. It could afford a 7% rate. Severance tax rates in Wyoming are not set. We've adjusted them many times. At one point, the coal severance tax was 10%. It's come down as low as 4%. And, for the last couple of decades, we've held it at 7%. And then, 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, as you cited, Mr. Chairman, we started bringing that down for a little parity with our oil and gas industry because we are competing more heavily with oil and gas. And unlike other states, we get along very well with our friends in the oil and gas industry, but we are competitors on the national scene. And, in anything that we can do to level the playing field with that is a good thing. The industry is the highest taxed industry in the state of Wyoming. I will go through my laundry list. In addition to the severance tax, the coal industry pays federal mineral royalties, ad valorem on production, state rents and royalties. We pay into the abandoned mine land fee, which is something that other industries don't do. We pay our sales and use taxes. We pay our ad valorem on property, and we also pay into the black lung fee. And between the black lung fee and the AML fee, you're looking at about $200 million a year. And the black lung doesn't even come to Wyoming, so we don't even see any of that. So the tax burden is high. And I think, going forward, the industry has changed a little bit. And, I always find it interesting when you hear folks in the newspapers or from academia say, well, it's the market that's deciding where coal is right now. And I kind of throw the flag on that one. We've all read our Milton Friedman rather. A market implies choices. And when one of those choices is overtaxed at the state level, overregulated at the federal level, and with the past outgoing administration actually made illegal with the ban on coal leasing, that's not a free market. And I think that, we can start, with elections have consequences. We're going to see some of that start to unwind a little bit. But I think we do have to do what we can to keep our industry competitive. Our coal seams are running deeper. It's getting a little bit more expensive to develop the coal than it was probably 2 decades ago. So any little thing that we can do, to keep the mineral economical to produce helps. And again, yeah, you take a little haircut. Every tax dollar that goes into government coffers has to originate somewhere, whether it's an individual or whether it's a company. And you as legislators, that's a policy decision to decide, strong jobs, a strong industry, revenue into the coffers, and that's a decision for you to make. But your questions earlier, Chairman Heiner, those are good questions to ask. And where are we gonna be? But I would posit to the committee that a strong industry that maybe keeps a little bit more in its coffers so that they can support jobs, support reinvestment in their equipment, support, their communities. I would say that that's a pretty good thing that we want to have, because we want to keep these companies open and generating revenue, and they will be well into the future. And just might not be as much as we used to do. I mean, back in the heady days of the mid-2000s with 400 million tons, we're pushing, $1.5 billion into coffers every year. 2023, 260 million. That's still a pretty spicy meatball, Mr. Chairman, and we want to keep that going. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleagues. I would stand for questions, but this is a good bill. It supports your core industries, and it's it's good for Wyoming, and I would stand for questions.
Any questions for Mr. Detail? Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Detail, I appreciate all the facts and figures you brought concerning some of what you pay. Do you have a rough figure on comparatively to the other sources of state revenue, where coal fits into that picture, and how, kind of include also the school element, what goes on with that, and there's that old saying that coal built every school in Wyoming, and I'd just like you to address that so we can kind of have a comparison of the impact and the others, how it compares to the burden others.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, those are great questions. I would say, I think oil is obviously the biggest taxpayer in the state, followed by gas, and we're probably around there, number 3. That was probably juxtaposed around a little bit about a decade ago. But that's kind of where we are, the big 3, your fossil fuel industries are your biggest taxpayers in the state. Your extraction industries pay the bills. With regards to the schools, probably over the last 3 decades, I want to say roughly $4.5 billion have come in from federal coal in the form of coal lease bonus bids. And all that money, a very wise foresight, again, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, that directed all that money to the school capital construction account. That's built school facilities in every county in the state. That money is gone now, because in order to get that money, in order to have that money coming in, you have to be leasing federal coal. And as it's been over the last decade, starting back with the Obama administration, when they put a moratorium on coal leasing and kind of threw a monkey in the wrench and put all this uncertainty in the first Trump administration, he removed that. We had started having companies work on leases again. And then, of course, with the Biden administration, one of their first acts in office was to reinstitute the moratorium, and subsequently have their BLM through the Buffalo RMP program amendments put a ban in place. So there's going to have to be a lot. There's just been too much uncertainty, but we have to start. And there, don't get me wrong, there is a desire to start leasing some more federal coal, because right now we have about 4 billion tons leased, depending on how you use it. But it takes 10 years to get a lease, and so if you want to start leasing coal going forward, you have to start on that process now, so that we can, give some certainty to the market, or to the utility market, because, utilities are looking at this too. And when they say, well, this resource isn't going to be available 10 years out, well, of course, they're going to change their plans and figure out what they're going to do. So I think, but we are going to see some changes. I know smarter people than me are looking at this at the federal level. And, I don't know if I answered your question or not. I think I danced around it a little bit, but in order to bring back those bonus bids, we have to start leasing federal coal. And those bonus bids have brought in a pretty good chunk of change for the state of Wyoming, and we've benefited from it tremendously.
Follow up?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Deti? I have a couple, Mr. Deti. I just want to be clear, because when PAW is in here, they say that they pay the most taxes, that they're the most taxed industry. And now you're saying that you pay the most taxes. I need to get the two of you across the table and hammer this out.
Mr. Chairman, I think what we said is probably dollar-wise, they definitely pay more taxes. But as far as the amount of specific taxes, we have the most, as far as the laundry list of taxes. They don't pay into the black lung, they don't pay into the abandoned mine land fee.
All right, thank you.
And so, yeah, that's does that clarify it for you, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Deti, the other question, here's an opportunity for you to be part of the solution. I always like pay-fors. So if we reduce severance tax, we lose what Representative Clausen says, a little less than $10 million. How do we pay for that? What's your ideas how to come up with other revenue or reduce spending to be able to pay for that?
You know, Mr. Chairman, and some of my colleagues might, but I will say this, I think you have a couple of industries that are ripe for taxation that aren't getting taxed right now.
All right, thank you.
And I think that the body should look at that.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for Mr. Deti? Seeing none, we'll move along here. Rennie?
Mr. Chairman, Rennie McKay, President of the Wyoming Business Alliance. Thanks a lot for having me today. The Wyoming Business Alliance supports House Bill 75, and I think generally for those of you who don't know the Business Alliance, we represent companies, businesses of all sizes, from all industries, from all corners of the state. Our main focus is trying to help those businesses grow, our members grow. And I think that I'll focus on the competitiveness part of this, the situation that this creates. As you've talked about, coal production is on the decline, but if you go back 2 years, and I used to have a different job and would watch state revenues very closely, coal production actually increased for a couple of years, really spiked in 1 year in particular. And that is because coal is very competitive with gas. Most of the coal mined in Wyoming leaves the state and goes to utilities elsewhere, usually east and south. And what happens is it's competing with gas, usually from south of us. And there's always a different tipping point, but for a long time it was about $4 an MCF. If gas got higher than that, then coal would be used at a much higher rate. And that's when you could see coal production come back. And that's what happened just about 2 years ago. We saw that coal production come back and actually increase for a year. So, when we talk about that competitiveness, that price point is very important to our coal. And then for the Business Alliance, that is really important to so many other industries and so many other businesses. Because as that production comes back, then you get to see more manufacturing, you get to see more services, you get to see just a much more vibrant economy, I think, here in Wyoming too. So you can look at it from the revenue side of it, and you can look at it just from the economic health of our communities. And so that it is a very important thing. And that's, I think, just an area why we're focused on supporting this year. So thank you for considering it. It is a very tough decision, as you point out. And you've got to figure out, what do you do with those revenues? In an ideal world, this actually helps, instead of seeing the decline as it is, maybe you flatten that rate by making this decision. And that could offset some of the loss in production too, is if you could get a little bit more production based on this. But it's going to really depend on a lot of factors. It is competitive with natural gas outside of Wyoming, is really what happens in that utility space. And so those utilities from Arkansas, Missouri, Texas, all of them are making decisions and looking at price points. So we appreciate what you're doing here, because it's not an easy decision.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Any questions for Mr. McKay? I have one question. We're seeing a lot of our power plants here in Wyoming fuel switching to natural gas, and I appreciate your comparison between natural gas and coal. With the new administration, natural gas exports may pick up with LNG, which could prop up the pricing for natural gas to where coal becomes much more economical. But as these power plants are switched and converted over to natural gas, is there a possibility of fuel switching back to coal? Or is it just, they're dedicated now to natural gas and we're stuck?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, that switching, you know, within the ideal scenario is that you have some of our power plants that would have both on board. And so that they could be switching even within, you know, in your home district or close by, there's one, and that would have both in this future scenario. So that provides that company and that power plant with options. But right, you know, generally, this is the challenge that we're seeing is we haven't seen new coal-fired power plants get built anywhere in Wyoming or elsewhere in a long time. And if those switches happen, if you don't have both within a power plant, if a whole power plant switches, it's a pretty big investment to go back.
So just to be clear, the switching, converting here in Wyoming does not include fuel switching capabilities. Is that correct, Mr. McKay?
Mr. Chairman, I would hate to say anything incorrect, so if Mr. Detai knows that one, but when you're talking about the specific unit switching within a power plant, then yeah, I think that's very difficult to, that unit itself can't, but ideally you have 4 units in it at some power plants, and you might have 2 gas and 2 coal for.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know about the idea of switching back and forth, but I would say that I think with the change of administration, and you hit on a key point, I mean, I think that's coming down today, the executive order, repealing the executive order for exports of LNG. That's gonna be huge, and you hit on the thing that getting that out, in theory, you're gonna bolster the domestic prices for gas, and that's gonna help us. And then the follow-up, though, what you're seeing, I think, with the new, again, elections have consequences, is that, you know, you've seen not all, but most of these early retirement dates being bumped back and in some cases taken off altogether. So we're still gonna have to fuel that coal-fired fleet that's online, that instead of being retired earlier is gonna stay on and do the work.
Thank you, Mr. Detai. Any further questions? Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, sir. I'm just curious, if we looked at any of the newer technologies, like Japan, for example, has been doing 80-20% slurries and 50-50% slurries, and then burning that mixture in existing coal-fired facilities with minimum modifications. And that has greatly reduced the carbon level of, you know, the coal burning process, period. And then you run it through those multi-million-dollar bag houses and reduces it further. Have you guys looked into this technology to extend the life of coal in Wyoming? Thank you.
Mr. McKay?
Mr. Chairman, this does, maybe, I previously worked for the governor, and so when I was in that role, there was a lot of time spent looking at that issue and talking with partners from around the globe, because that is, you know, this is an enormous conversation that we're trying to have that has impacts globally. And so that is the Integrated Test Center in Campbell County is meant to test some of the new technologies, and was home to the X Prize competition there to look at some of the uses for trying to catch some of that carbon coming off the stream there and how it could be commercialized. School of Energy Resources is doing some great research, and the Wyoming Energy Authority is doing some great research, because so that is paramount, because there is such a drive for trying to have lower carbon coal-fired power plants, and if that can be achieved, then that's meets that objective. So I think that there's some great research that is happening both here and Japan is doing some great work, but Japanese companies have come to Wyoming and have invested here too. So it's in some of that research. So there's some really good partnerships that are trying to drive towards some of those solutions.
All right, thank you. All right, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll move along.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for those of you who might not know me, I'm Hank Hoversland, and I am the Executive Director of the Wyoming Taxpayers Association. The Wyoming Taxpayers Association is an advocacy group with a complementary research arm, and we are not a pro-tax or anti-tax organization. Rather, Our mission is to advocate in favor of sound tax policies for a healthy Wyoming economy. To determine what a sound tax policy is, WTA places each fiscal proposal before its cornerstones of taxations. To pass this litmus test, a tax proposal must be justified, equitable, stable, and transparent. With that being said, Mr. Chairman, WTA supports the severance tax reduction on surface coal contemplated in House Bill 75 for the following reasons. The proposal is justified because it brings coal on a level playing field with other energy resources. As has been noted, it's the highest percentage tax rate right now at 6.5% for severance taxes. And additionally, it is our belief that this is another step in the right direction to reducing the state's over-reliance on the mineral industry for revenue, as has been pointed out many times since the Tax Reform 2000 Committee. Second, the reduction is equitable as it decreases the severance tax rate for surface coal by 0.5%, which is in line with the severance tax rate paid by the natural gas industry. This is a stable revenue source and allows companies to invest in the state to retain more funds to invest back in their own infrastructure and workers to make the industry more competitive. And finally, the reduction for surface coal is transparent as it does not change the way this tax is administered, which is already visible and simple to administer. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Coversland, right? Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Any other
Mr. Chairman.
individuals representing businesses that'd like to testify? Seeing none, we'll close public, there's nobody on, Mark, nobody on Zoom, okay. We'll close public testimony at this point. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Representative Lawley, seconded by Representative Tarver. Committee, do we need to go through the bill? Any changes? Any discussion? Question being called. Mark, it's a roll call vote.
Representative Campbell,
Aye.
Representative Knapp,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Lawley,
Aye.
Representative Schmidt. Aye. Representative Tarver,
Aye.
Chairman Heiner,
Aye.
bill passes.
All right, thank you. So House Bill 75 passes the Minerals Committee and will move to the floor as Cal. And I assume Representative Clouston will carry that bill. Committee, it's time to go back to House Bill 80. We've closed public comment on that bill. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Knapp.
I would offer, would you like an amendment before we move the bill, or would you like a movement first?
Let's move the bill so we can work the bill.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the bill.
Do we have a second? Second by Representative Tarver, moved by Representative Knapp. Okay, now Representative Knapp.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And first of all, I want to give the reason for the amendment. We had great testimony on Friday and further testimony, I think, through the weekend, which was good. I've heard from constituents, I've heard from stakeholders and shareholders, I've heard from board members. And the amendment will go to the purpose of the bill, because I think we got a little bit off track in our discussions on Friday. This bill is not to drill down into separate individual corporations for ESG stances for investment. This bill simply wishes to codify the rules that are in place for our fiduciaries, and that would codify the investment policy statement that was done back in 2023, which we're living by today and obviously hasn't affected investments, and is just a placeholder for safety when doing investments. So with that, I will go through the amendment. And I gave a little guideline. There will be some changes to it. I apologize to the committee, but starting on page 2, we would strike lines 21 through 23 and insert pecuniary factors mean prudently determined base fiduciary decisions. based on appropriate investment horizons consistent with the fund's objectives and investment policies, while adhering to compliance, statutory and regulatory guidance. Pecuniary factors do not include the furtherance of environmental, social, governance, political, or ideological interests. And that language comes directly from the IPC. Page 3. We would actually strike lines 1 through 23 and insert non-pecuniary factors mean fiduciary decisions that do not provide confidence in increased returns or lower risk. Conversely, they may cause harm and concern. Non-pecuniary diversions from fiduciary responsibilities will most likely result in lower returns and increased risk, resulting in less funding being available to the state of Wyoming in general. And again, that comes from the IPS language that we currently follow in rules. On page 4, we would strike lines 1 through 14. And the reason I did this is I struck anything that tried to further define what a pecuniary decision would be. And the reason I did that is because whether an issue that a fund is attempting to accomplish socially or environmentally, whether it's on the right or whether it's on the left, we would like it to be the same as justice. We'd like it to be blind. And so it really doesn't help anything to be listing ideological reasons on either side. So I struck that. On page 4, continuing, just re-enumerating.
Representative Knapp, just for my clarification, on page 4, we're striking line 14
Yes.
only?
Well, it's 1 through 14.
1 through 14?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay, a little confusion there. Proceed.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Page 4, just a change of ruminants there to coincide with the changes stricken. Page 6. On line 5, we would insert pecuniary before financial. The same on page 6, line 22. The same on page 7, line 7. The same on page 7, line 9. And the same on page 8, line 5. Oh, I'm sorry, page 8, line 5. Let's go to that one. So this deals with the Attorney General's office, and if there were to be a situation where an anomaly occurred, this would change striking may to shall investigate. And those would be the changes in my amendment.
Okay, any discussion? I'm sorry? Representative JT Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so I'm clear on your amendment on page 7, line 9, insert pecuniary before financial. I don't see the financial in that line, so I just didn't know if that was needed in that paragraph or we strike that part of the amendment.
Oh, we can strike that one, I apologize.
So just to be clear, striking page 7, line 9, where it says insert pecuniary before financial.
Correct.
You're striking that out of your amendment. Okay? Thank you, Representative Larson. Any other comments? Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I really appreciate the bringer of the amendment for his work he did over the weekend on this, and just want to make that clear before I say anything else, but this is quite a large change in the bill, and I'm not even sure, I mean, I don't know if there's been any analysis done on the title of the bill. I mean, I think it stays within the nature of what we were trying to do with the bill, but I'm wondering if it may be acceptable to do some sort of substitute bill, or at least get an official amendment drafted so the public can look at it, provide comment on it, and so this would require reopening public comment, but just because I'd like to see what, for transparency purposes for the public, I'd like to see what their thoughts are on this, see if it changes their opinion on how the bill is drafted. That's just my initial thoughts, so.
Thank you, Representative. We've had public comment on this. It's pretty typical to work the bill as a committee, which is what we're doing right now, which includes amendments. There will be other opportunities to work the bill in the committee of the whole, but many of these changes come directly from the state treasurer's memo that we had last Friday. So we will continue with that.
May I just make a comment?
Yes, Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I do appreciate the work that Representative Knapp did and his work to conform it, but it still is an extensive bill, and seeing how this looks, I think we've tried to have a policy, or that we really want the public to follow what we're doing. So, I was hard for me to follow, although I really see the intent and I support it, but we have had public testimony, but this is a different bill. We had a lot of public testimony from some of the retirement funds, firefighters, others, gotten a lot of emails from teachers, and I would just want to make sure they don't get to speak on the floor. They don't get to give any testimony. And I would urge and join in with Representative Larson to say, I think that we want to make sure that the public sees, these retirees sees, that we can give them some confidence in a format where they can give some feedback. Hopefully it will be positive, and then we can move the bill. It really, for purposes of transparency and for me to have a sense of, did we meet the mark in this? And I'm seeing it for the first time here and right now, and I think it gets closer, a lot closer, but it just seems like the right thing to do is to open public testimony, perhaps notice it maybe again, and let people come and speak to what it looks like with all these changes. That's just my thought.
Thank you, Representative Lawley. Any other comments? So we haven't moved the amendment. Do we have any motion?
I motion to move the amendment.
Okay, so it's moved by Representative Tarver, seconded by Representative Campbell. Any other discussion? Do we have a question? Do we have a motion for a question? Sensing that the committee wants to vote. So all those in favor of Representative Knapp's amendment, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Seeing none. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I
Representative.
just re-urge my request that we get a clean copy of this and see how this looks with these changes and before we make a decision. I would like to see that. I think it's fair to say, and a lot of talk out there about, whether the legislators come in and quickly make changes and the public's not aware, and I don't want to be accused of that in this. I don't think that's intent of you, or certainly Chairman or Representative Knapp, but I think we're kind of in that zone where this has changed enough.
Thank you, Representative Lawley. Right now, our rules don't allow that, but one of the rules we will hear this morning will allow that to be done. And we will vote on that today in our rules and procedures to have those put within the document just for our use. But right now, that does not allow us with the rules we have in place.
But do we have the ability to table it for now and then get to where we can have a clean copy?
The rules have not been approved yet. That's part of our discussion later on today.
There already is the rule to table. It exists outside. And I think I understand what rule you're talking about, which would make this simpler, but it doesn't mean we don't have a solution.
So yes, we can still table this if we have a motion to table this, yes.
I make a motion to table it.
All right. So we have a motion to table by Representative Lawley. Is there a second? Second by Representative Larson. That is not debatable. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. Nay. Okay, motion's failed. Any further discussion? Mark, would you call the roll? We're voting on House Bill 80 as amended.
Representative Campbell,
Aye.
Representative Knapp,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
No.
Representative Lawley,
Aye.
Representative Riggins, sorry, I have that vote. Representative Schmidt. Aye. Representative Tarver,
Aye.
Chairman Heiner.
Aye. We have some proxy votes.
We do.
Okay. So what's the count on that one?
8-1 in favor.
All right, so House Bill 80 passed the committee. And as soon as we pass, assuming our new rules pass today, Mark, I'm going to ask you to put those all into a draft document that we can all see, all the amendments in there, so we can see it holistically, so everyone can see that.
Okay.
Okay, we'll proceed now to our last bill for the day. Representative Lawley. So we're hearing House Bill 41, Environmental Quality Irrevocable Letters of Credit. And our own Representative Lawley will explain this bill to us. Representative Lawley, please
Thank-
state your name for the record.
Yes, Representative Martha Lawley, Representative for House District 27. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning again, Minerals Committee. This bill, House Bill 41, which I'll go through with you in a moment, was actually a result of a constituent request. A credit union in my community wrote me and about a kind of a issue they were having with regard to issuing irrevocable letters of credit for certain DEQ bonding situations in lieu of a bond to issue the letter of credit. And I'll just read briefly, if you allow me, Mr. Chairman, from the original context, so you can get a context for the reason for the bill and the reason that there was a need to clarify the statute. She begins with, I am writing to request that you review the above-mentioned statute and consider proposing a revision. Within the statute, irrevocable letters of credit will only be accepted issued by a bank and with narrow definitions. And what she had told me also personally is what was happening is there were times that they were allowed to issue as a credit union irrevocable letters of credit in lieu of a bond. And then other times they were told that they weren't sure, there wasn't clarity to those who were making that decision of whether that could be done through a credit union versus a bank. So what the goal of this bill is to clarify what circumstances credit unions can issue irrevocable letters of credit, and in effect, then where they can't. And one of those dividing lines has to do with the federal things that we have primacy on, and that DEQ is following federal regulations, and those are very clear, and credit unions are not allowed under the federal statute. So I worked with DEQ to come up with a solution to clarify so that these credit unions would know where they can and where they can't, and they could operate, and operators that banked at credit unions and wanted to use their credit unions that they were doing business with to issue these irrevocable letters of credit, that they had that opportunity. So that's sort of this backstory. And again, worked with DEQ, and I'll kind of go through it. It's some small changes, but important for clarity. On page 1, you see the title, you see the section 3511-418, cash or securities in lieu of bond. And then on page 2 starts the revisions. Page 2, line 1, as you see it there, you see in line 1, A, subject to section B of the section. Actually, DEQ, upon review of this the final time, struck out that what's inserted there. So at line 1, it strikes out the subject, beginning at subject to subsection B of this section, and inserts for coal mines. So that's something that we'll be bringing as an amendment, but just going through it now, I just want to point that out, but DEQ will cover that when they come up. So it would say section A for coal mines in lieu of a bond, and then the provision that's there. And then down on line 9, we again bring some clarity for non-coal mining operations. And the big, again, distinction here is that, as it says here on line, starting on line 10, that is not owned or operated by the United States or a federal agency. And then in lieu of a bond, for the operator's principal may deposit federally insured certificates of deposit payable to the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality, or cash, or government securities, or irrevocable letters of credit issued by a bank or credit union organized to do business in the United States, or all 4. So they have some options. They can use this and a little bit of that to create all that's needed in lieu of a bond. But credit union is clearly stated there. You move down on page 2, line 19. Irrevocable letters of credit deposited under this section shall be issued by a bank that is insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or a credit union that is insured by the National Credit Union Administration, which is kind of like the FDIC for credit unions. So then on page 3, again, this is regarding solid waste facilities, in particular bonding for solid waste facilities. So section 3511-504, with the first changes on line 9, and it just inserts or credit union, bank or credit union, organized to do business in the United States, or all 4. And then irrevocable letters of credit deposited under this subsection shall be issued by a bank that is insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or a credit union that is insured by the National Credit Union Administration. And that's really the changes in the bill, the purpose for the bill, to bring clarity, to give operators really is, I mean, of course, it's going to be a benefit to the credit unions, but it also has a real important benefit to these operators to be able to make some choices of what they might submit in lieu of a bond. And many of them do bank at credit unions and have that relationship, and it just makes it clear they can use those. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Representative Lawley. Any questions for the representative? Representative, just going to the last paragraph, the enacting clause, you've got in section 4, you've got this subsection is effective July 1st, and then you specify sections 3 and 4 are effective immediately. Could you give us reasoning for the different enactments?
Well, section 3 in particular requires or gives a opportunity for DEQ to do some rulemaking if necessary. So I think that's why there's a distinction there.
All right. Seeing no other questions, thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, any testimony from our public, from our state departments? Director Parfit, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Todd Parfit, Director of the Department of Environmental Quality. With me is Kimber Wickman, who is the Administrator for Management Services within the agency, but is also the agency's lead and expert on bonding. And then Brandy O'Brien, who is the new Land Quality Division Administrator. This bill does provide clarity that credit unions can be utilized for showing the financial assurance. And it provides, as was mentioned, provides another financial assurance option for operators. But there is the one clarification, and the reason for, I can explain the reason for that clarification, but on page 2, line 1, we are proposing that we would strike subject to subsection B of this section and replace that with for coal mines in lieu of a bond. And the reason for that is the existing language that you see on lines, well, most of line 1 through line 7 is existing language in statute now that pertains to both coal mines and non-coal. But it's the language that comes from the federal coal regulations so that it matches exactly with the federal requirements. By putting the paragraph B in there, you clarify the non-coal mining operations, which can use credit unions. Coal mines cannot by federal law. And so just for clarity, that's why we're proposing that minor adjustment to line 1. And then just wanted to follow up on the question that you had, Mr. Chairman, regarding why certain parts of the bill would be effective immediately. And it is for the rulemaking, and that's so we can start rulemaking before July 1. With that, I'll just turn it over to Administrator Wickman to see if she has any comments, and if not, then she'll stand for any questions.
Administrator Whitman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I believe Representative Lawley explained it fully, and I'd make myself available for questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Director Parfit? We got to have some questions for him. He's traveled a long ways to get here. So, Director, this looks like a good idea. Why haven't we thought about it before? Why are we waiting till today to do this? What's the downside of this, please?
So, Mr. Chairman, I think it's because the constituent brought up the issue that, we have operated under the language that we have, primarily because it's federal law for the coal mines. And we didn't think about that whenever this was created. I don't know when those statutes were actually put on the books for the, well, there wasn't anything specifically listed for non-coal mines. And this actually draws that out in the distinction between the coal mine requirements, which is set by federal law, which only allows banks to provide those instruments. So until this constituent brought this up, I don't think that we were looking at that.
So what I'm hearing is a constituent or a citizen of the state of Wyoming can actually change laws in the state of Wyoming for the better through their activities and getting involved.
Mr. Chairman, that's right. You know, we listen to the constituents. You listen to the constituents, and we try to make the adjustments where it's appropriate.
Thank you very much. This is a good story. Any other questions for Director? Thank you. Thank you for being here. Any other state departments that would like to testify? Seeing none, any citizens of the state of Wyoming that would like to provide testimony that are here in the room? Okay. Any representatives of business entities that would like to provide testimony? Please come forward.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Nice to see you on this balmy Monday morning. Bobby Frank on behalf of Wyoming's credit unions. I will just tell you simply, this issue was brought forward. One of our credit unions in the Bighorn Basin area had a member business, operated a gravel mine, requested the credit union do an irrevocable letter of credit, submitted it to DEQ. And DEQ was unable to accept that. So they couldn't operate through their own banking institution under this scenario. So this would fix that issue. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions for Ms. Fank? Seeing none, thank you for being
Thank
here.
you.
Mr. Meyer. Good morning and welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Scott Meyer on behalf of the Wyoming Bankers Association. I know I had a conversation briefly with Representative Lawley, and we talked a little bit about this. But on retrospect, and after doing some research this weekend, I'm not sure I really can support this. The NCUA is not the FDIC. And they kind of like to be the same, but they're not really. They don't have the same powers. They don't have the same oversight. They don't do the same things that the FDIC says. So there is definitely a reason why federal law says for coal mines that we stick with the banks. And I want to keep in mind that with banks are taxpayers in this state. That's your money that the banks are dealing with. Credit unions don't. Now, they may pay some property taxes, but they don't pay sales tax. They don't do any of that kind of stuff. And they certainly don't pay any income tax, although most of the entities here don't either from a state standpoint, but for federal, they do. It's a slippery slope. And there's definitely a reason why we look at this and say, here's why we do it with banks. Banks are different creatures. Banks are subject to different rules, like the Community Reinvestment Act, where they have to deal with your local communities and low-income areas, and also by federal law. So I would say that it's not just the same. And having practiced law for almost 30 years and 25 of those representing credit unions, I know credit unions pretty well, and I really like my credit union because my kids are members and I'm with there. But this is an area that I would say I don't support, because there is reasons why the federal government has said what it has regarding coal mines, and it says the same thing regarding mining in general. That's why we do that. So we don't support this bill, and I'd certainly stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Any questions? Mr. Meyer, the NCUA and the FDIC, that, you know, the FDIC has a backstop with insurance through the federal government. Does the NCUA also have that $250,000 backstop federally insured, or help me understand the differences?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the NCUA does have the $250,000 backstop. They do provide the insurance. But unlike the FDIC, which is pretty much a heavy regulator, the NCUA, in my opinion, is more of a cheerleader. They do whatever they can to help the credit unions, but they're not in there, busting chops where they need to, where the FDIC does. And the FDIC is always making everybody a little bit more nervous when they come in there, but not so much with the NCUA. They are more of a cheerleader, they're more of a friend to the credit union industry, but they're not, they don't have the same regulatory authority that the FDIC has.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Myers? Representative Tarver, please.
Mr. Meyer, thank you for being here. So the example that was given to us at the rock quarry, what potential problems do you see if this bill was to move forward and they were allowed to use their credit union?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Tarver, I would say that the only issue that I look at that is the fact that I don't know where that money is coming from necessarily, but more importantly, I don't know where it's going. If it's going to the DEQ, now all of a sudden, now the DEQ is holding money. And that's a public entity, and that by the Constitution is not allowed. It has to be held by a bank. So I do run into those problems where that could be an issue of constitutionality. Again, it's a letter of credit. It's not, they're not making the deposit. But that's where I look at that.
Follow up? Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Meyer.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Detai, long time no see.
Tired of my face pretty early in this one.
At one point, I'd like to have your son come up and testify.
Be careful what you ask for, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Travis Detai with the Wyoming Mining Association. And I think we're going to lend our support to this bill just as another option for a smaller operator to cover their bonding obligations. So we would stand in support of it.
Thank you, Mr. Detai. Any questions? Mr. Detai, what are the downsides? Help us to see both sides here.
Mr. Chairman, I, with respect to Mr. Meyer, I don't see the downside. I just see the operators looking for every option that they can get to cover their obligations. And if this is another tool in the toolbox, why, I think someone should have a chance to take a look at it.
Thank you. Anyone else for public testimony? Seeing none, we will close public testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Representative Larson, seconded by Representative Schmidt. Would you like to go through the bill? Question being called already.
Chairman, I would like a clarification.
Okay, we have an amendment.
That's right.
We have an amendment we have to deal with. Does anyone want to move this amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have that language in front of me, so I'll have somebody else
Representative
move.
Lawley, would you like to move this amendment?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Tarver. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, I propose amendment on page 2, line 1, striking the word subject to subsection B of this section and insert for coal mines.
All right. Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, I sense your
Question.
willingness to question. All those in favor of Representative Lawley's proposed amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, any other amendments? Now, Representative Larson, thank you. Question being called. Mark, would you call the roll, please?
Representative Campbell,
Aye.
Representative Knapp,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Lawley,
Aye.
I'm sorry,
Aye.
Representative Schmidt,
Aye.
Representative Tarver,
Aye.
Chairman Heiner,
Aye.
8 and 1 excused.
Thank you, Mark. So House Bill 41 has passed committee. Representative Lawley, I assume you will carry this on the floor?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. So, committee, that's all the bills that we have noticed for today. I wish I had some more. I didn't anticipate getting through this many so quickly. So with that, we will adjourn the meeting today. Thank you very much.